this is my event planning class. So my name is the Honorable Noble Aneira Applegate. I reside in the Kingdom of North Shield, which is the UP of Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, part of Ontario, and Manitoba. Um, I live in the barony of Yarra Vettler, excuse me, which mundanely is Madison, Wisconsin, and kind of the area around it. But our main part is Madison. I have done a lot of event planning over the years. I feel bad because I can never remember how many. I just pulled it up. Too far. Sorry, I have another screen over here where it has all my stuff. All right, so I have completed 17 events, and I'm currently in the middle of planning 2 more. Blades of Glory, which is the end of August here in Yarra, hopefully. It was supposed to be the end of March, but we rescheduled due to COVID-19. And then Wacky Guard Ball will be in January next year. And again, here in Yarra Vettler. Just to give you some background on what kind of events I've held or autocrated or event planned. I've done everything from baronial moots all the way up to I did a known world event. And kind of everything in between. What I'm going to go through are things to think about when event planning, as far as writing a bid and presenting it to your group to be approved. Each local group and kingdom does have separate rules and procedures for how to submit a bid for an event. So for those specifics, you're going to need to talk to someone local. I know what my barony does, along with the other shires that I've lived in the past, but just so you know. So when you start event planning, and this class is kind of aimed at the idea of this is a new event, a new idea. When you're planning, when you take over an event that's been done previous years, some of these things won't apply. You're not going to have to figure out what the some of these parts are. Like, you probably won't have to find a site. You're not deciding a theme necessarily, things like that. So this idea is kind of a new event planning through. So your first real step in this is what you want the event to be. For example, Blades of Glory, like I said, I'm in the middle of planning right now, is an armored combat event. It is tournament all day. And it just goes from one tournament to the next. And that's all that's happening at this event. I've done multiple fighter school, fighter symposium, those kind of things. So, it was just class, but they were all martial related. So we had armored combat classes, we had rapier classes, we had youth combat classes. Some of the other, is it an ANS day? Is it kind of a everything event? Is it camping? Or for North Shield, winter camping's not really a thing. I mean, there's some people that do it, but I don't think we have any events right now that are winter camping. We used to up in the UP of Michigan. That was a regular event, but not anymore. So is it like a one-day event? Is it a multiple-day event? So you need to figure out all those things first before you go anywhere else. You can't find a site or work on a budget or any of those things until you know what the tentative plan or what kind of event it's going to be. And the reason that is because until you know what the kind of tentative plan or idea where you want to go, you don't know what your site requirements are. I'm not saying you have to have a fleshed out, all right, I'm having this class, and this class, but you need to know, hey, I'm going to have this class, I'm going to have classes, I'm going to have a feast, I'm going to have those things, so that you know what you're looking for in a site. I do tend to do a lot of armored combat related events personally, because I'm married to a fighter. Technically a fighter too, but that's a long story and no one wants to hear it. But I'm heavily involved in the armored combat community. So sites, when we're looking for sites. So we know what we're going to do. We know what the tentative plan, we know what the idea of the event is. So we start looking for sites. So that can be something that's really hard. I hear it, I've heard it in multiple kingdoms where I've taught this class. Finding sites is hard. And one thing I always recommend is thinking outside the box. Um, think about events, places that, we've never done events before. Um, think about things like, okay, if you were planning your wedding reception, what are some of those sites you might use? Or your kid's graduation party, or family reunion. Don't lock yourself in the box of it's an SCA event, so it has to be at this kind of site. Think about other things. For example, I'm going to use probably Blades of Glory and Wacky Guard Ball a lot for my examples because those are two events I'm using right now, or doing right now. Blades of Glory, and I've held multiple actually events at this site, and is a hockey rink. In the summer, they drop the ice. They drop it like end of March, and then they put it back on like Labor Day weekend. So April through Labor Day weekend, there's no ice on it. It's a great site for fighting events. We don't have to worry about the floor. There's lots and lots of space. It's a hockey rink, so there's showers, things like that. For Wacky Guard Ball, we hold it at a VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. So it has a bar, and then it has like a big reception hall, and it has a basement, and it's great. They love us. The bartender requests to work our event there every year. We've held it there for 4 years now. And we're about to go into our 5th. So we use that. We've used other VFWs for like Mayday moods, things like that. Check out parks. And if you live in a bigger city like I do, I live in Madison, not a huge city like, Chicago or New York or anything, but it's bigger city and it's the state capital. Things are a little more expensive, right? And when you're in those bigger cities, look at going just like a little farther out in your group. So, for example, I did a North Shield coordination last year, and we held it in what's called Waterloo, Wisconsin, which I'm sure nobody has ever heard of unless you're from North Shield. And it's a small little town. It's a town of like 1,000 people, but they have this beautiful, they call it Fireman's Park, and they have this beautiful like venue, and then we had the fighting outside, and it was amazing and beautiful, and it was much more cost efficient. If you live in a bigger city though, and transportation's an issue, it might not be an option, but most people in the SCA, they have cars, or there's enough people that do that they can carpool. So check out those smaller towns and parks. Another great one is fairgrounds. I've done multiple events at fairgrounds. So, and again, I don't look at where Dane County, the county I live in, has it, because it's the bigger one. It's, excuse me, it's, more expensive, things like that. I wouldn't have it necessarily where the state fairground is, at least not Wisconsin. Wisconsin's all about their fairs, which I love. But like, I wouldn't have it at the state fairgrounds, but your little local county fairgrounds might be really great. So don't be afraid to, look, stretch your fingers out to possible other sites. If you're okay with a dry site, schools can be also really great. Churches are hit and miss on if they're dry or not, but there's another option. So I guess my big thing is just think outside the box. Don't be afraid. It's going to cost you a phone call, right? Or maybe sometimes searching on the web. So much nowadays, so many sites, they have that information right there on the web. And they might not have pricing, but you're going to be able to see, hey, they have pictures. You can see what is the floor, what is the square footage? Is there a kitchen? Things like that. And things you want to look at, what your site works depends on what you're doing, and what they'll allow. For example, if you have armored combat, they probably don't want us fighting on their pretty, wood floors that metal needs are going to take up. Now, Nordskogen, which is a barony in my kingdom, has an event called 12th Night. A lot of kingdoms have 12th Night. And it's at a church, and they have gyms. They have like multiple basketball court gyms, and that's where fighting is. And what they do is the group has mats that they lay down and tape together, and that's where the fighting happens, so that we can use that space, but we're not harming the site. So things like that. And when you go look at a potential site, if you're not familiar with an activity and their needs, so like let's say, again, I'm heavily involved in armored combat because of my husband. If there's going to be armored combat and you don't know a lot about it, take a marshal with you to look at it. If you're going to have a feast or a lunch or both, take your feast steward with you to look at the kitchen. Your feast steward will thank you for this, because if you're like me, I don't know a lot about cooking, like SCA. I've never done an SCA feast. I've done a lunch once, and I can never do it again. I give so much credit to the people who do. It is not my skill set. Like I couldn't go look at a kitchen for an event and be like, oh yeah, that'll be fine. Take your feast steward with you. If you're ever unsure about any of the activities, take the person either who's going to be in charge of it at the event or who knows about it with you, and then they'll be able to give you that better idea. And more eyes are always better than less. So it's always good to ask. Does anyone have questions about sites? Okay. All right. So we kind of have an idea what we're doing. We found a site. It's going to work great. Price is great. I know probably not everyone is from Midrealm. I think I recognize names from my class on Tuesday that was not Midrealm or North Shield. When you're looking at cost of site, you need to look at what it's going to cost, how many people you think will attend, and if you're going to be able to break even. And I'll get into that in the budget later. But another thing to think about is cost of the event, or cost of the site. When you pick a site, make sure you find out all of the rules. Is it a dry site? Is it wet? Is it discreetly damp? Is off-site food allowed? And think about little things. Are we allowed to use tape on the walls to hang up schedules? Are there parts of the site we can use and parts that aren't allowed? For example, the Fireman's Park, it was so much for the building. And then we also rented the baseball diamond behind it to have armored combat and rapier on. But that was an additional cost. They also have a really old carousel, and we decided to rent it for like 3 hours for people to use during coronation, kind of that time between courts. It was a huge hit, but it's an additional cost. So you got to look at all the different parts. I've looked at sites where it was like so much per room plus another fee for the kitchen and another fee for this. So make sure you get the cost of what it will be total when you're considering these things. Also, when you write the bid, highly recommend, putting all those details in, what's available, what's not available. I'm not going to go into it in depth, but both Lady Isbeta from Midrealm and I teach a disability services for event planners class, and I wrote a whole article about it. If anyone wants me to email them that, I'm more than happy to. But just take a look at that, what's accessible and what's not for the event site. Depending on the event, there's other information you're going to want to look at too. If you're writing a bid for a known world event, some of the things they're going to want to know: where's the nearest airport? What are hotels like? Is there public shuttles from the airport to hotels that are nearby, or from those hotels to the site? How many hotels are there? medical facilities, they're going to want to know, especially if it's martial related. So known world rapier, known world armored combat, especially just because there's more likely a chance of injury. But it's good to have for any known world event, having that info. So like I have the bid in my other screen that I wrote for the known world event. Where's the hospital? I said that there was a hospital in that town. There were 3 more 30 minutes away. That there was an urgent care in the town. That the police, fire, and EMS was less than a mile away from site. That kind of information. Also look at food if people want to leave site to go for food. Not everyone's going to eat lunch or feast. Multitude of reasons, right? People might not like it. People might have allergies or sensitivities or their diet. So looking at what restaurants are available nearby for them. I also recommend having a list of those available for people, especially multi-day events, especially if there's limited lunches or feasts. So we got our site, we know our tentative plan, and so now we have to look at other things, right? So you got to write a budget. It's my least favorite thing to do. I work with budgets all day, every day in my job, and I am not an accountant. So when you're looking at budgets, so there's things to think of that cost money to run events outside of the site, right? So you got your initial site, whatever that costs. But then you need to look at other things you might have. Are you having site tokens? And how much are they going to cost? Depending on the kingdom and where you are, site tokens can be big deal or not. Blades of Glory in August, my event that I'm running, is not having site tokens. We just don't. The fighters aren't going to wear them because they're fighting all day. So most of the time they just don't even take them. So we decided to just take that out of our budget. For Known World Academy of Rapier and Known World Armored Combat Collegium, we had coins specially made that one side had K-War and the other side had K-WAC for our site tokens. Because Known World events, people collect those. PennSec obviously always has a site token and you have to wear it. So you kind of you have to gauge what your local group wants, what your kingdom wants, and decide on site tokens. I'm really bad. Outside of PennSec, I pretty much never wear my site token. I'm terrible. Other things to think about is printing. What is it going to cost to print things? Do you need to print things? Is there someone who can get you a discount on printing? Can you get away with print? You don't need much printed, and I could get away with printing it at work. So you got to look at that. Common things that are printed, signage. You're going to want. I saw the baby sneak in. You're going to want signs printed going, this is this event for this kingdom, on the door, so people make sure they got the right spot. You're probably going to want signs printed for, what are the site fees? What are the different fees? You're going to want signs. You're going to need sign-in sheets. You're going to need, in my kingdom, our sign-in sheet and waiver are all one, but you got to print those out. Regular waivers, youth waivers. Do you need to print booklets? Do you need to print schedules? Things like that. And depending on the event and your job or other people's jobs, you might just be able to print a few things at work and it's not a big deal. Or you might need to, go to Kiko's, go to Office Depot and have them print it for you. So you got to look at that and then kind of price it out. You're not going to get an exact total, but it's always better to put it a little bit more than you think you're going to use than a little bit less, because it's always better to go under budget than over. And ask around in your shire or your barony. People might have ways to print it at work. you know. I worked at a job once where you could use the copier as much as you wanted, and you paid like super cheap amount for those copies. When I did Fighter Symposium, a member of my household works at a company where he could just print the booklets, because we didn't need hundreds like a known world event, but he was able to print enough that we were good for the event, and we didn't have to pay anything. For the known world event, a different member of my Barony works at Office Depot and got us a huge discount. So don't be afraid to ask. It's better to plan for the full amount, but if you can, let your Barony or SCA members help. Other things to think about: printing tokens, water bearing supplies. If you're having fighting, really, if you're having any kind of martial activity, armored, rapier, cut and thrust, equestrian, archery, thrown weapons, youth boffer, youth rapier, water bearing supplies, we don't want our friends to really die, so thinking about Gatorade, Powerade, pretzels, oranges, pickles, putting a budget in for that. I had another one and now I lost it. I'm sorry. It'll come back to me. If you're doing lunch or feast, those are technically separate budgets unless it is included in your site fee. So if, let's say, site fee is $10 and then lunch is $5 and feast is $10, those are all separate, people pay for. They should be all separate budgets on your bid when you're presenting this to your group. And the goal is each of those budgets are breaking even. So if feast is going to be for 50 people and the budget is $100, I know that's ridiculous. I'm just doing easy math. Your cost for feast should be $2, right? So that you break even. The SCA is a nonprofit, which is not a not-for-profit. It is okay to make some money so that your group has money for other events too, if they lose money, because we don't want to bankrupt ourselves. But we also don't want to make a ton of money off of our friends. It's finding that balance. But for like lunch and feast, it's a 50-person feast, just break that even, right? $500 budget. Is that what, $10 a person for feast? Have it break even. Same thing for lunch. Sites are a little different because it's harder to predict how many people you're going to get. Feast, 50 people, that's it, right? There can't be more. That's the only amount of tickets we're going to sell for feast. Site, we're going to let everyone in, so it's a little harder to predict. There are ways to get a range on where you think it'll be, but like coronations and crowns, or if you're in a principality, your coronets, you're going to have a higher number. People are more willing to travel for those kingdom events. If it's a super specialty event, you're going to have lower numbers. We have an event here in North Shield called Griffin Needle Challenge. If you're in the Midrealm, it's pretty much the same thing as Golden Seamstress. People show up at like 7, at 10 o'clock Friday night. They start sewing and they sew until 6 o'clock Saturday and then present their outfits for judging. It's not a big number event comparatively because it's people who are usually super into costuming, or they're like me and got tucked into it with a friend and still had fun. But you got to kind of work with that, where your numbers you think they're going to be. And then based on where you think about they're going to be is how you figure out their budget. I'm just using my Node World event because that's the bid I have up right now. It was the first one I found. My total budget was $2,320 for the 2-day event. That was printing, tokens, lunch was included in the site fee, site costs, and a few other things. Oh no, don't do that. Oh, sorry, my computer wants to scan. I'm just changing that so it doesn't do it right now. Thank you. Because otherwise it would have scanned and then restarted. So I had that 2,320. And then we kind of did the, well, if 200 people attend, this is what it would be. And then if 400 attend, this is what it would be. And kind of divided that up to figure out a site fee. Be nice to your gatekeepers or people who run Troll. I know different kingdoms use different names. Try to keep your site fees even numbers, like 5, 10, 15, 20. Have it in with 5, divisible by 5. The reason is if you have, let's say it's a $6 site fee, they have a good chance of running out of ones. And then they have to have a ton of ones, which afterwards they have to then count all those ones. Whereas if you have it as like 5, 10, 15, it's going to be a lot easier. Especially now because the non-member surcharge is also 5. When I started, it was 3. So they needed ones either way. But now it's a nice even 5. Your gatekeeper and your exchequer will appreciate you. Next part, after you figure out your budget, some of these pieces you're going to need to do before budget, but I'm just going in order of my bid, and I apologize, is your event staff. So basically, the way to think about it is you need an event staff for every different activity that's happening at the event, because you should not take it all on by yourself. I learned this the hard way. I was young when I started in the SCA and started event planning, but as an event steward, you have to delegate. It will save you. And if you have really good staff, you're going to find out how much fun event planning is and will just fall in love with it like I do. But some of the event staff that you have to have, no matter what your activity is you need someone in charge of gate or troll or whatever term you use in your kingdom. And whoever is in charge of gate has to be a paid member of the SCA and has to be approved by your local exchequer, just because it's money, right? Everything's a little stickier with money. People can volunteer at gate without being members. And depending on your kingdom, they might have to be a member if they're handling the money, but non-members could help with like sign-in sheets and things like that. So check your local group or your kingdom. But I know that whoever's in charge of gate has to be a paid member. Your autocrat or event steward, you actually also have to be a paid member because you are considered a deputy to the seneschal. Those are the only 2 event staff positions that are required to be members unless your kingdom is pay to play, which means you have to have a paid membership to participate in like armored combat or rapier or cut and thrust. Then if your kingdom has that rule, your marshals are obviously also paid members. I take it back. All marshals have to be paid members because they're officers. So they're the other one. But yes, there we go. All right. So then your gate, other offices to think about. If you're having classes, have a class coordinator. If you're doing something like Known World, Rapier and Costuming, or Rapier and Armored Combat Known World, consider having deans or class coordinators for each track. So you have a class coordinator for Rapier and you have a class coordinator for Armored. Even though most of us, cross and go into different parts of our hobby, it'll just be a lot easier for them. So having a separate one. If this is just a regular baronial kingdom event with classes, you're probably fine just having one class coordinator. If you're having any martial activity, you need a marshal in charge for that activity. It cannot be a marshal in training. It has to be a fully warranted marshal. They can do it with a marshal in training, so that the marshal in training can get experience and get signatures and working their way towards being fully warranted. But when it comes to official paperwork, it has to be a fully warranted marshal. If you're having a feast, you need a feast steward. If you're having lunch, you need someone in charge of lunch. If you think you might have royalty, I recommend having a royalty liaison. Basically what they do is they work with their managers. In North Shield, we call them chamberlains. I know other kingdoms call them chief of staff, kind of their go-to person, to make sure that the royalty room is ready, has things they need, gives them all the information. They're kind of like, well, liaison, just like it's in the title. If you're having an ANS competition, have someone in charge of that. Sorry, it's been a week. So yeah, just basically any activity, have someone in charge of it. Be there for them, help them, check in on them, but let them do their thing. Give them their chance to shine. Schedule. So as things get going, right, you've got your bid in, you got your site, you got everything going. So, put together, even with your bid, a tentative schedule, like kind of what's the plan for the event? Is it a one-day event? Have one site opens, one site closes. When does gate open? When are the activities? When is lunch? When is court? I've been really lucky with my events, and I've worked with a lot of amazing royalty over the years. Most of the time, if you be like, hey, your majesties, this is when court would work really well. Does that work for you? They're usually really flexible. They might ask you to move it a little bit back and forth, depending. But have your royalty liaison work with them. Usually the way I write the bid is court. Oh, how do I write it? Tentative time for court, depending on their majesties / highnesses. And then I include excellencies because I live in a barony. And be flexible with court, and make sure you have everyone has off-site. Okay, to be fair, I don't think it's very rare that courts are ever on time. Nothing ever goes as planned. James did have a squire brother who reigned as king, and he was always on time, but he was a Marine. I'm sorry, James is my husband. So yeah, tentative schedule. And then in your bid, include a tentative what the plan is, right? We're going to have tournaments. We're going to have classes. We're going to have this. Wacky Garball is, we're going to have fun. So for example, this year at Wacky Garball, we're not going to have any classes scheduled. We're trying a new technique. So Wacky Garball is traditionally dance classes during the day, a fashion show, court, and then a dance ball. And we're trying things a little different this year. Oh, and then there's a gaming room too for mostly period games. A couple non-period games get slipped in there too. We're trying a new thing this year. We're doing dance classes on demand. And so what we're doing is we're finding teachers who know how to teach dance and want to teach dance and making them baldricks. And when someone wants to learn a dance, they're going to grab the teacher and go, hey, will you teach me this dance? And we'll do dance classes on demand. It just gives more flexibility to it and fun. There's also quite a bit of drinking at Wacky Garball. It's at a VFW in a small town in Wisconsin. And those not from Wisconsin, we pretty much subsidize our alcohol here. So it's a really, really fun time. And if you ever want to come to North Shield and come to the event, contact me and I will arrange crash space for you because it's just a lot of fun. We're very silly. every year has a different theme. This year it's Midsummer Night's Dream. Okay. And like I said, feast budget, have your tentative feast menu if you can, or at least the theme of it. Same thing for lunch. And then, of course, the budget. So now we have it. Our event has been approved. If you're putting in a bid for a kingdom event, such as crown, coronation, kingdom ANS, ANS tournaments, North Shield, it's called SUN, Stellar University of North Shield. This is RUM, Royal University of Midrealm. Once it passes your group, it goes up to kingdom level to get approved. Once it's done there, and they, pick your bid, then you start moving on. If it's a known world event, it goes to kingdom, and then it goes to society, and it takes a while. It's a process, but it's a good process, and it is totally worth running a known world event. I loved it. But now that we got this bid and we're going, we get to go do all the fun things. One thing I should mention for kingdom events, this does not apply to known world events or local events, only to kingdom events, such as crown and coronation. I highly recommend these as first events, and people are very surprised when I say that. Crown and coronations are great first events to run because they tell you what is needed. You're not figuring things out. Plus, you get a lot of help from the kingdom. For example, crown tournament, you don't have to find a marshal in charge. That is traditionally the KEM, the Kingdom Earl Marshal. They're going to run that crown tournament. They're going to have someone running the list table. And everyone knows what to expect at crown. There's morning court. They present, the combatants and their consorts. There's attorney. There's chill time while the Shiv have their meeting with the new heirs and the king and queen. There's evening court, and then there's feast. So it's very, what's going to happen, you know what to do, and you get a ton of help from Kingdom. My first event I ever ran was North Shield's third crown. And obviously it kind of stuck. So I highly, highly recommend it. Excuse me, I need water. So now we get to have the fun, right? Part of the fun event planning, at least for me, is advertising, building up the excitement of that event. If you want people to come, you got to do advertising and event build up the excitement for it. Because if people don't know about it, they're not going to come. And in the time we live in, outside of COVID-19, it's all about online advertising and information. Way back when I started, I remember we would send flyers to the seneschal of every group in our kingdom to advertise our event. That's just not the world we live in anymore. Nowadays, it's all about your website for your event and your Facebook event. That's where pretty much everyone is going to get information. Your ads and your kingdom newsletters are normally very small, and they don't have a lot of info. They really just give the basics of where it is, how much it is, and the name of the event. Maybe a little more, but not a lot. So to get information out, you really got to use the internet. Have a good website. I can't recommend that enough. I've known multiple people who went, well, the event kind of looked okay, but there was no info on it. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know when things were starting. There wasn't much. What fighting was happening? What classes were happening? None of it was on the website. So they're like, eh. So it's really important that as soon as you have that info, get it out there. Let people know about it. You don't necessarily want to do an information dump on Facebook. It's kind of good to sporadically post things, but as soon as you have the information, totally put it on that website for people to go look at. Because if they're going to your website, they're already interested in the event. So have that info for there. What I like to do for Facebook events, especially if it's an event where there's a lot of classes or tournaments, is like I would post when I was working on the Known World event, I would post about a new class or a new teacher that was coming like once a week. Like, oh, look, this teacher's coming now. Or, oh, look, this teacher's coming. Or this class is happening. You know, just enough to keep people's attention, but not so much that they're like, oh, there's another post by Kristen about this event. I'm tired of it. So it's finding that balance, right? But we got to have that advertisement so people know. And there's no reason not to have that website. I know some groups are relying strictly on Facebook events, but the truth is not everyone's on Facebook. I know that's shocking to some people, but I can think of multiple people off the top of my head. They're not on Facebook. My local Baron isn't on Facebook, and it's totally cool. But that's why we need to have both. You need to have that website, but you also need to have that Facebook event. As far as creating a Facebook event, please check with your local kingdom on what their policy is. I know in North Shield, we go through our social media officer. They create the event, and then they add the event steward as one of the hosts so that you can edit information as it comes. You can add information, things like that. But as I know there's multiple kingdoms represented here, please check with your kingdom law, and your barony or shire may have a social media policy also. It should allow a Facebook event, but how it's created, you need to check what your local rules are. Day of the event, day before the event, take a deep breath, relax. It's going to be fun, I promise. Like I said, this is my favorite thing to do in the SCA is event planning. I love it so much. That doesn't mean I don't get anxiety, that I don't get stressed about it. And I don't worry about no one showing up or a huge snowstorm or someone getting hurt at the event or all those things in the back of my brain. But it is still so much fun. So that day before, take that breath and relax. You're going to have fun. Check in with your staff regularly during this process. You know, see if they need anything from you. Do they need help? You know, are your class coordinators finding people to teach, or do they need help? How's your marshal doing? Do they need someone to run the list table for them? Does archery need help finding backdrops for shooting archery? Do thrown weapons need help finding targets? Just check in on them. Don't micromanage, because that's going to just cause you more stress. But just check in, you know, maybe depending on how they are and what they need. You know, maybe a once a month check-in is good. Maybe as the event goes closer, you might need to do a once a week check-in. You know, gauge what your staff needs and be there for them, because they are there for you. Sorry, I'm going to just mute you because of the background white noise. So the day of, you should be the first one on site. You should be there to help, you know, gate, you know, set up. Depending on the event, another staff you might want to think about is having someone in charge of setup and possibly also in charge of cleanup. They might be the same person, they might be different, kind of depends on the event. But you should be the first one on site. You know, and you're there to help your staff, you know, if they're not sure where they're supposed to be, if they need help with something, you know, just kind of all hands on deck, you know, help where it's needed. Make sure everything's ready so that when site or gate opens, we're ready to have people come in. Also know, even let's say we say gate opens at 8:30, non-staff will be there at 8 o'clock to get in. So just be prepared for that. You're also going to be the last one off site. And while I tell you over and over, trust your staff, have faith in your staff, also do a last walkthrough on site. The SCA has a really great reputation of leaving a place cleaner than where we found it. But part of that is the event steward taking that last walk through the site, checking things, did everything get swept? Did the garbage get taken out if it needed to? Do people leave anything behind? I guarantee you will have a lost and found. Something will be left behind. My mom always said that's going to grandma's house syndrome. Go to grandma's house, you always leave something behind when you come home. Just walk through the whole site and check anywhere the site was involved, just to make sure. Make sure you have all of your own stuff. I have been guilty of that. I have a great Marshall box that has all the Marshall paperwork that one of my husband's squires made me, and it's beautiful. It's wood. It has my heraldry on it. My husband was the marshal in charge for coronation last year, where I was one of the event stewards, and we didn't leave site till 10 o'clock, and we had been there since 7 a.m., and we were both very tired. We drove from Waterloo, Wisconsin home, which is 30 to 40 minutes. And we got home about 11-ish to realize that the Marshall box was still sitting outside by the field in Waterloo. So at 11 o'clock, we drove all the way back to Waterloo, got our box, drove all the way home, and went, we're not going to the post travel. So double check everywhere. Don't just assume you have all your own stuff either. Afterwards, depending on what your kingdom requirements are and your local group requirements are, you probably have to do an event report. Usually what these reports include is, again, depending on your kingdom, they're going to want to know if the event lost money or made money or broke even. Same with feast and lunch. They're going to want to know how things went. What went well, possibly what could be better last time. Injuries, court reports. So if you have, those things, you're going to want to get a copy of your marshal's report. If there's court, you're going to want a copy of your herald's report. You're going to want to know how gate was, how many people, how many non-members, how many kids. If you have a separate rate for kids, they're going to want to know that. Things like that. All that's going to go in your report. Depending, again, on your local kingdom or barony or shire, they might have a report online that you just fill out. It might just be an oral report at your next business meeting. Like I said, check with your local group on those requirements to see which one it is. I know in North Shield we have an online report, and we have the gate and exchequer also need to do a separate report. Yeah. And then you're going to decide that, hey, event planning is a lot of fun and I want to do it again. That's what's going to happen. Okay, I just talked for a really long time and now I want to know if anyone has questions.
Well, I don't have a question, but I know from doing an event last year that I ended up learning with Youth Point, because I don't know that you mentioned this. Youth Point, the person in charge has to have a background check that's current, and you have to have 2 non-related adults in the room at all times.
Not only non-related, they also can't live together. Like you can't have roommates.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's just one thing with the staffing. You have to make sure that that's covered.
Yep, the youth have to have a background check. Also, if your kingdom does the youth toy run, I know North Shield does it. I've seen East Kingdom do it. Basically what it is the royal calls all the kids up to court.
Yep, Midrealm does that.
Yep, and they have the toy chest, and that person runs, and then the kids chase them. Either the runner or someone watching the runner also has to have a background check.
Yep.
So, yep. Sadly, I haven't done a lot of events where there's a ton of youth stuff. I would like to change that in the future. haven't yet. The opportunity hasn't arose yet. So very cute baby, by the way.
Thanks. He's our youngest. We have 4.
Wow.
So
My
that's part of the reason why I'm involved in the youth activities.
No, that's fair. Mine's, you can see his picture. Mine's 18
Okay.
and not super into the SCA. He thinks we're nerds.
A
Yeah,
little.
I accept
Um,
it. I wave my nerd flag.
Well, I know as far as like thinking of staffing, another issue we ran into last year, because we went to a Boy Scout camp, and with them to use their archery field, our archery marshal had to take the Boy Scouts archery class, and they had to be certified through the Boy Scouts in order to use the field to
Yep.
marshal at an SCA event.
Yep, that's kind of those site requirements, site
Yeah.
rules. Are they? Um, yeah, like I tend to not to do dry sites. And one thing to think about also with dry sites, if it's an A&S competition, um, some sites will allow you to have alcoholic beverages for A&S, but not have a just flat out anyone can drink. So that's also checking on. I've seen that. I also was at an A&S competition once, and I think it was a Midlands one. I know it was a Midlands one. Um, I was judging brewing and vintning, and they had us go offsite to someone's house that lived really near site to judge the brewing and vintning, and then they gave us rides back afterwards. So you can be creative.
Yeah, I remember going to, I think it was a rum in Chicago where, yes, we had to go to a separate place for, I might be wrong on the event, but yes, we had to go separate to a different place for the drinking and then go back for all of the other
Yeah,
activities.
yeah. What sites they are hard to find. They're hard to find in North Shield, and we have 10 of the top 15 most alcoholic cities, was it? Or something? I'm looking at my husband. It was an article that came out. And sometimes we have a hard time finding a wet site. Yeah, but I know it was Midlands Regional Fair because my protege sister in Pona is the one who got me to come down for it. So that's why I can remember it. And so her Barony of Carrickbon was the host. So only reason I remember is because it was her. So I'm super close to the border. For those who don't know, no, it was not Gunnershire. This was like 6-7 years ago. It was Carrickbon. No, totally cool. Like I said, I only remember because it was a Pona. But yeah, so you can also be creative. What sites are kind of hard to find? They're getting harder and harder to find. So I'm going to tell you, if you do a camping event and it's a dry site, you're probably not going to get much attendance. Just because I'm just knowing people. Please feel free to find me on Facebook or email me. I'm always happy to answer questions, help people with budgets, just any of that. I can talk event planning pretty much all day long. Or if you want notes on the event planning and disabilities class, I have those too.